Welcome to Truth Stream. Today we have the honor of being with Celeste Ryan, a pro per litigant. And basically, in a nutshell, that means that she is representing herself. And we are going to share her story. It's going to unfold and you're going to know more about what we are talking about. So, Celeste, welcome to our show. Thank you for being here.
Hi. Thank you for having me.
So we've had her father on the show before. Her father is Matt Ryan. We'll just leave it at that for now. Wonderful interview. Also an amazing Papa Bear. So we go to these monthly events, and we see Matt. We finally met Celeste. And we heard about this story, and we just thought it was a great fit for our show. So anyway, I'm going to kick this over to Mr. Stone to perhaps maybe ask the first question and get this thing going with a bang. So without further ado.
Well, just to let everybody know, this is a long, detailed story, so it would be impossible to cram it into just the 1 hour. So this will be part one of 2, 3. We'll see where it goes. But with that, I think maybe the best place to start is at the beginning of your story, Celeste.
Cool. So basically, if you really want to go all the way back, when I was 6 years old, I was involved in a car accident. We were rear-ended, and it was a pretty bad accident. It was up in Port Orchard, Washington, and my dad was a practicing chiropractor at the time. And basically, I had some spinal injuries. I had a brain injury, and kind of went on living that way. And with my dad being my primary treating physician. And back in 2016, I actually filed a lawsuit on behalf of that accident, and didn't get an attorney, and have been doing it all myself, which is something that most people don't really think to do. I don't know what's wrong with me. But yeah, so since 2016, I've been prosecuting a personal injury case in Washington. So yeah, start there.
So that's the start. So yeah, let us lead us down how this has unfolded for you, and maybe some of the things that you've run into while doing what you're doing.
And maybe start with what motivated you to represent yourself.
Well, I was 20 years old. Well, actually, I was 19, and my dad is a doctor, and so I had known about my conditions for a long time, and I had been pretty much professionally trained of how to mitigate them, which most people don't really get. You go in to your doctor once a week or twice a week, and they see you for 15 minutes and send you on your way. But for me, I had somebody, a professional overseeing everything I did. He taught me how to move, taught me how to not move, taught me how to strike a balance between, all of the different components and everything. And so I had lived for, up to 14 years at that point with these conditions, and had been, I was only 6 at the time. So I had grown with them. I'd gone to school. I had entered the workforce, learned how to drive, all with these conditions. So I knew pretty well how they were going to affect me, how they were going to impact me for the rest of my life. They're permanent. And when I started compiling all of the evidence and the information to write my demand letter, I started crunching the numbers and tried to use be as objective as I possibly could, where I did hours and hours of research into all of the different jobs, and like what their physical requirements were, and what their average pay was, and credentials and education, all that kind of stuff, for like a huge number of jobs in California. And basically, did a ton of calculations on that. I won't go into the specifics of it, but I came to a pretty big number. I looked up the averages for different treatments that I needed. I looked up surgeries. I looked up inflation and insurance with pre-existing conditions. I did a ton of research to try and be as objective as I possibly could, mixed with my own personal experience that I had over a decade of, experience with. So I came to some numbers that are not what most people come to, especially in the legal profession. And when I went shopping for an attorney, I would bring my whole binder full of all my research and my medical record. And I thought, like, hey, here's a good case for you. I've got it all done. I've done all the work for you. And I probably met with, I don't know, 7 to 10 different firms and went in and talked to these attorneys and was just really unimpressed, honestly. They all seemed just kind of disinterested. They all seemed like, you know, they just didn't really get it. And I also had kind of this feeling of, what am I hiring you for? Like, are you going to tell my story better than I can tell my story? Are you going to get up and speak on my behalf and have as much understanding and impact that I will if I get up and talk about it? Like, what are you really here for?
Right.
I didn't know at the time. And I shopped around and I just wasn't willing to, have somebody else tell me what they thought it was worth. And then, take control of the whole thing and kind of just, dole out the rest to me when they were done. That just didn't really sit right with me. I also thought that I had a really straightforward case. I had it really well documented. I had lots of doctors' opinions. I had, my dad did an excellent job of documenting. He did all of the proper scans, and like I've got, several sets of x-rays and CT scans and MRIs. Like I've got all of it. I went and got treatment. I documented, like I, had a pretty like, this is what happened. Really straightforward.
Were they reluctant?
And
Was that
I'm
what
sorry?
So what you experienced is they were reluctant to take the case, or they just weren't enthusiastic about it?
They weren't willing to take it for and prosecute it as zealously as I would. They wanted to do a quick payout where we're going to like, I'll send this off to your insurance company and we'll see what they say. And then whatever. They wanted to do like, minuscule. And I was coming from a place of, this has been my whole life almost. I know exactly what this is. And I like, you're not going to convince me otherwise. And if you're trying to convince me of what you think it's worth, which is less than what I think it's worth, what are you going to do in court?
Right.
Convince a jury that it's worth less than I think it's worth. So I just was, really unimpressed and kind of disappointed. And at that point, my statute of limitations was running out. And I basically either could do it myself or let somebody else do it badly. And I just couldn't do that. And so I filed. And I was 20 years old. It was a month before my 21st birthday. And got all the paperwork done and served them and started the lawsuit. And then, I've just been kind of playing like, I just kind of react. Like they'll do something and I'll react to it. And then they'll do it. Like I just kind of let them, like, what are you going to do? And then handle it when it comes. And that's just kind of the way that it's been.
So would you say that this shaped what you chose to be educated in?
Oh yeah, I just started school. And I this experience sucks and I would really not want anybody to go through it, which is what I would like to go to school and try and fix. However, there are a lot of things that I am so grateful for this experience just because of how much I've learned and the way that I've learned it. It's unfolded so naturally where I'll have something that I go searching for, like the information instead of just being told. And then you kind of have to undo that. It's just been this very organic, like I just like find it. And then, or I go on a hunt for the source of the information or the reason why, or, versus a teacher standing up and telling you this is what it is and this is why. And then you just kind of accept that. So I've started school I want to go to law school and get my law degree. And I think I've got some pretty solid issues that I'd like to tackle within the legal profession. Some very specific laws and very specific practices that I would like to go after and do some constitutional challenges against. And this is definitely like my dad and I, honestly, it's kind of morbid, but we joke about it all the time. that I was really reluctant to go to school. I really didn't want to go. I don't trust the institutions. I don't trust what they're doing. But I got in 2 more car accidents.
Oh, no.
And so we kind of joke that like until I like follow my life path, I'm just gonna keep getting hit by cars.
Oh my God. Wow.
Wow.
So I finally went to school and I haven't been hit since. So
Talking
Wow.
about being
But,
guided. Wow.
Yeah.
yeah, I definitely think that my path has been laid before me. And that's another thing I'm grateful for. Most people spend their whole lives wandering around, wondering what they're gonna do. And I'm like pretty solidly focused on where I'm going.
So that being said, do you, how do I want to phrase this? When you, so where is the case now? And is it kind of up to you playing this chess move back and forth and learning more? I mean, is it kind of on your timeline with what you learn and then what you present, or how is this playing out right now, and how far along are you in the process?
So we have been scheduled for our trial since March of 2018. So we've been waiting for 4 years now. Oh yeah. And I was up in Washington in October because we were scheduled for trial, and they put us on standby. I've been on call for trial for 2 months, where we keep having days and then they'll say, oh, it's not available. And then we'll have another day. We'll might be able to get in this day. And then I was going like week by week almost for the last almost 3 months. And we're just scheduled for whenever there's an opening, and I'll have to fly back to Washington. I'm in California, and fly back and go to trial, hopefully. But
are they aware that you're in school? Like, do they want you to get fully educated first and then be able to go in and really represent yourself?
Are they giving you COVID excuses and that kind of thing, or do you get
oh yeah,
maybe they're trying to wear you out so that they won't have to face you?
well, that's kind of like, I don't know. I can't really say exactly. I have my theories, and I have, there's patterns and everything, but I mean, they do not want to go to trial with me. And unfortunately, when COVID hit, they closed the courthouse for 2 years. So everything was closed down. And because I'm a civil case, I'm at the very bottom of the to-do list. So criminal comes before me, probate comes before me, family matters come before me. So basically, if there's a scheduling issue with that, then I just get bumped. And when COVID hit, because they just stopped, that queue got very, very, very long of people.
Yeah.
Which, on another note, I can't imagine people that were in jail and the courts were closed, and how many plea deals did they strike with people because they just didn't want to wait 2 years for the court to open. And that's a whole other can of worms. But that's kind of the same thing as, COVID hit, and it really manipulated and kind of did a lot to the court system itself with it just being closed. So I'm the oldest civil case in Kitsap County.
Wow.
Yeah. I don't know if I'm the oldest like there's ever been. Like, I don't know if maybe somebody else had to wait 10 years, but as of right now, as far as being in line for civil cases, I'm the first in line because I'm the oldest case. So I don't know if that's normal.
Right.
Wow. Now, at some point along the line, I know you may have encountered some corruption. Does that come later in the story, or?
No.
Okay.
Pretty much started out with it. So there are different stages of litigation. And the first stage is you get all the paperwork in order. It's a complaint and a summons, and you have it served, and they answer, and you do all that kind of stuff. And then there's a notice of appearance for attorneys. That you have to appear in court. That's how the court gets jurisdiction over you, your appearance. So we went through that initial phase, and then discovery opens up. And discovery is basically, which I'm a firm believer in discovery. I don't have an issue with discovery. I think if I'm going to make a claim against somebody, whether I'm justified or not, I have to give them the opportunity where you get the information that the allegations I'm making against you, you get to be fully informed of that. So we opened up discovery, and you do these, they're called interrogatories, which are written questions for information. There's requests for production. So they want to see the actual physical document that you're sending, or that kind of thing. You can do requests for inspection, all kinds of stuff. So you open up discovery. When we opened discovery, like I said, I felt like I have a really straightforward case, and I think of myself as a pretty fair person, and they did discovery questions to me and I answered every single one of them, which I've come to find out is not what people do. They don't just hand it over. And I answered every question. I gave them every document. I showed for my deposition. My dad did his deposition. I had no problem. What information do you want? I signed full medical releases. If there's a medical record out there on me, you can have it. Go ahead. And so they did. And yes, we went through discovery, and I learned how to do that from them sending me their requests, and I would basically just copy and paste and send it back. All the information that they wanted from me, I guess I'll get it from you too. They didn't really answer very many of them. But it was through that I found out some issues with the liability of the defendants, which kind of started this whole unraveling of the whole situation. So I had sent them requests for maintenance records for the year before the accident, because the defendants in this case, one of them is a commercial company and the other is their employee. And a commercial entity is vicariously liable for their employee. So they're automatically liable. That's just the way that it is. And when you're a business entity in Washington State and you have a business license and you're practicing commerce out there, you have basically more of a duty of care to not endanger or harm the public with your commerce. So they have higher standards of their duty of care. So their maintenance of their vehicles has to be pristine. It's not like if I was in an accident and my brakes have been squeaky for a couple months, there's a lower duty of care than a commercial entity, where if you're putting vehicles on the road, they have to be in proper working order, or you're more liable, basically.
Got it.
And so I sent out these requests for the maintenance records for the year before the accident. I wanted to see, was the vehicle in proper working order, because you're a business entity. And they sent me some maintenance records that didn't really quite add up. And it was really interesting. I the next time we do this, I hope that I would be able to show you because it's kind of funny, actually. And so I had sent it out for the year, and they had an in-house mechanic. It was a plumbing company that had a fleet of vehicles, so they had an in-house mechanic. And the in-house mechanic had, I think on 2 or 3 occasions, written a report that the brakes were not really working that great. They were pulling hard to the right, and that they needed to be fixed. And then there was a maintenance record of them fixing the brakes in October of 2002. The accident was December 2002. This was, a month and a half before the accident. They fixed the brakes. They provided the maintenance record for that. So then they also provided the repair estimate for after the accident. And this was at Goodyear Tire that they had the repair estimate done. And we were looking at the dates, and the dates of the maintenance records were kind of weird because the mileage on the vehicle didn't add up. There were 10,000 less miles in December than there was in October. So that was the first kind of well, that's weird. Why would there be how are there 10,000 less 2 months later? That doesn't make any sense. So my dad and I go out and we buy a magnifying glass And we're looking at the date on this one record, and the very, very bottom of it, like if you were to draw a 2, it'd be like that. Like pretend you're drawing a 2. Versus 2003, it would be like this and then down. At the very bottom of the 2 was this tiny little line that looked as though somebody had cut off the bottom of the 3 to look like a 2, to make it seem like they had fixed the brakes before the accident. But in reality, they fixed them a year later and then tried to send me records that they're false. That's falsifying evidence. You cannot do that.
Right. Real quick, 2 things. So I set this up so you can share the screen. So if there's anything on your computer you want to share to show the people, you can do that. And then B, maybe if you want to walk people through maybe what happened in the accident, why you thought it'd be a quick thing, and now why it's so drawn out, because most people may not really know what even happened.
Right. So that whole like the maintenance thing was like kind of clarified even for me. How did this happen? Oh, the brakes weren't working.
Right. So the
And
brakes
then
went out and they
opened
hit you.
up.
Is that part of what happened?
Basically, we were traveling down Bay Street. We were going towards Bremerton and Port Orchard.
Okay.
There were 2 cars ahead of us. My grandma had just picked up my brother and I from school. And this is actually kind of a miraculous thing anyway. But I was 6, and so I was sitting up on, you know, the little fold out cup holders in the back seat.
Yeah.
I was sitting up on that because I wanted to be able to see. And my grandma saw me in the rear view mirror and got mad at me and said, scoot over and buckle up. So I scooted right over, and the last thing I remember was clicking my seatbelt, and we just got smashed.
Wow.
Oh my.
So I was very, very, very close to just flying through the windshield. I don't know how that happened, but the interesting thing about that is that I've always like remembered that. They like people think it's weird that I actually remember that at that age. But the weird thing is that we've looked at my like imaging and my scans for the injuries that I got, and all of my injuries are like I'm looking down. So that was the moment of impact. Oh, I think I lost your sound.
Yeah, sorry, he muted the button. So what you're saying is the injuries are right when you look down to buckle the seatbelt. That's why you were looking.
They're as though that's weird because I got whiplash. So basically my spine. So the way that I tore ligaments in my neck, the way that they're torn, the way that my and my dad would explain this a lot better, but basically he's explained to me that whiplash like that is not so much just like the mechanics and like the physical part, but it is your nervous system that it will reset itself to the injury. Wherever you were at the injury, your brain now thinks that's the new normal. And so your brain will coordinate everything and try and put you back to what it thinks is normal.
Oh,
so now my brain thinks that my normal is like looking, and so all of my stuff is always like pulling like to the side.
wow.
So
Wow.
yeah, so that's crazy. Like everything, every little instance of this whole thing is just kind of weird and crazy. But so that's the last thing I remember was I clicked my seatbelt and we got smashed. It was a pretty bad accident. It was a total vehicle. We got the repair estimate back, afterwards, that the fuel tank had to be replaced. And I don't know if you know anything about cars, but they make the fuel tank really difficult to get to.
Right.
And they put it in front of the rear axle to make it, because it'll explode if the fuel tank, gets damaged. So that means that they had to go through the entire trunk, through the back seat, and into like past the rear axle and actually destroy the gas tank that's in the middle of the car. So it was not some little like whoopsies, broke a tail light. It was a completely, destroyed vehicle. It was towed away from the scene, never seen again. And I woke up, there was an electronics store across the street that I woke up in, and that's kind of all I remember. My dad came and because he was a chiropractor in Port Orchard, he knew a lot of the firefighters and the EMTs and stuff. So the paramedics that had shown up actually knew my dad and knew that we were his kids and called him and said, you need to come down here and pick up your kids. And my dad did an examination on us. He took my brother and I back to his office and did a full exam, and then took us home. And basically it was just ice and rest, and the damage was done. There's nothing to really do at that point. So we just, we tried to just keep the inflammation down and try and help out with that.
So this has been your life for basically 20 years.
Yeah.
Close to your, wow.
Yeah, I'm 26.
Oh my.
So basically what happened was I had whiplash, I tore a bunch of ligaments, and so I have instability in my neck. So they, your ligaments are what keeps your bone, like your muscles move your bones, and then your ligaments keep them from moving too much. And once you stretch a ligament or tear a ligament, they don't heal. It's not like a broken bone where it's, it'll heal itself. So once it's done, it's done. That's the way that it is. It's like, stretching out a rubber band, it's not going to go back. And so because of that, it causes, a disruption in a lot of stuff, your blood flow, and because your bones are moving too much, your nervous system's like always firing that this is a problem, causes, muscles to tense around. And basically I'm like a walking brace with my muscles, chronic tension headaches, migraines. I had a mild traumatic brain injury where the back of my brain is a little bit malformed now. So it looks pretty weird on an MRI, but I have a condition called dysautonomia. And dysautonomia is a dysfunction of my autonomic nervous system, which is the basically control of all of your automatic functions. So your heart rate, your hormone regulation, your sleep, like everything is controlled by your autonomic nervous system. And so I have particularly what's called postural intolerance, where if I'm sitting or I'm laying down or I'm in a certain relaxed state and I stand up, you switch between your sympathetic and your parasympathetic nervous system. And for me, it doesn't quite fire right. So when I go from sitting and I have a low heart rate and everything's just kind of relaxed, and I stand up or I change positions a little bit too drastically, there's a delay where it won't quite send the signal. And so my heart won't pump fast enough, and then I get dizzy and sometimes I'll faint. Yeah.
Wow.
So that's primary. I have weird temperature regulation where if I get too hot, I can't cool down. If I get too cold, I can't warm up. I'll break out in hives if I get too hot. I get migraine headaches from that. I have about 3 different types of headaches that I get that are from kind of competing conditions. This was not like a minor thing. This was a pretty disruptive, permanent, lifelong injury.
Yeah. So I have to ask, so the amount, we didn't need to go into the amounts, but the percentage. So if they were going to give you a certain percentage for just okay, going to give you this and blah, blah, blah. So that amount compared to what it is you're going for, is there a percentage difference? And have you received anything at all? Or are you continuing on this path to then eventually get some compensation for it? Or what does that look like right now?
You mean what would I accept at this point?
Well, I mean, if they were going to give you a certain amount, your goal is to get what, double that, triple that, quadruple that, obviously, because it's worth it. And have you received anything at all? I mean, are they trying to give you enough? Be like, okay, there you go. They haven't given you anything.
I haven't gotten a single cent. Not one.
Oh, there's been no attempt.
I had one offer. We had a mandatory settlement conference, and I had an offer, and I didn't even counter. I just left.
Wow.
And
So pathetic.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is this company still in business?
Yes.
Okay. I mean,
Yes, they're in Silverdale.
Okay, Silverdale. And this is one of their drivers, and in a truck that sounds to have been faulty, where the brakes didn't work, and they slammed into you at age 6.
Mm-hmm.
And now I don't, I can imagine it's on the back of their minds, man, we are going to lose our ass at some point from this girl.
Well, but when you mentioned the statute of limitations, I'm just curious because you said you're coming up on that, because it's been quite some time.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that is another, like, kind of speaks to the bigger issues of this whole thing, is that from what I just rattled off to you, that sounds like, a lot. And most people don't, and how you would categorize that whole thing is soft tissue injury. When people hear soft tissue injury, they kind of automatically assume it's like, oh, you strained a muscle, like that kind of a thing. So it might not be that bad. And so the problem with this case is that I had a soft tissue injury at a young enough age to see how I would develop with that. And then because I was only 6 in Washington State, the statute of limitations is 3 years after you're 18. So I had until I was 21 to file or settle, which is unusual because most people, if I was 27 and I got hit, I would have 3 years. I'd have till I was 30. 3 years is not really enough time to, I understand that it's reasonable that if, they want to get things kind of taken care of and done, and, you don't want to pop up 10 years after something and hit somebody with a lawsuit. I understand that. But it really isn't enough time to see how something like that would affect you, your day to day. It can take anywhere. They don't even consider an injury permanent until 6 months. And then you're kind of dealing with the repercussions of like, well, I was out of work and like, how do I do this? So the first year is kind of like bunk anyway, of just, you're not really living your normal life within that time period. And it just really isn't enough time. And I bet you anybody who's watching this, and you guys yourself, ask anybody who has been through something like that and they settled, ask them 10, 15, 20 years later, was it enough?
And they
I'll
will say
bet
no.
you they'll say no.
I
Right.
can
They will
tell
say
you right
no.
now, I was thrown off a luggage cart working for an airline when I was in college, and I broke both my arms. And well, it also did damage to my
Oh, wow.
shoulders and a number of other things. And I have difficulty sleeping because of it now. My shoulder pain has gotten significantly worse.
Mhm.
This is years and years and years later. I'm just discovering, the effects. So I totally see what you're saying. But what I'm
Yeah, so
wondering, are
most
they?
people don't know.
Yeah.
Right.
Now, are they potentially trying to run out the clock on you? Is that
They
they're
can't run out the clock anymore.
they
So
can't?
Not
the
now.
statute of limitations
Wow.
only applies to either settling the claim or filing the lawsuit. Once you file, you have preserved your right, and there's no more statute of limitations anymore once you file it. They basically are saying you have to do something with this. You have to take a step forward, or you lose your right to take a step forward. So you can't just wait indefinitely, which is, another issue. But yeah, once you file the lawsuit itself, you've preserved your right and the statute no longer applies. So I filed it about a month before the end of my statute of limitations, where I would have lost the right to file a lawsuit.
Okay. So now you can be as thorough as possible.
Yeah, once it's done, and that's just the way that it is, and it's going on. But that only applies to making a decision. It's kind of like, you got to do something. You got to move forward some way, or you give it up. It's basically a waiver of your rights if you decide not to pursue it within that time limit.
Right. So now I know we're probably going to have a couple more interviews and have your dad on here as well. Where are things now, and what would you like to see? What would be like the next best step for you to see to start having this kind of go in the direction that you're working on as you get more and more educated and talk more and more to your father about this situation?
At this point, you mean like for the trial itself?
Yeah. I mean, obviously you're still waiting on the
Or just
trial, but I
like,
imagine with the delays of the
mhm.
trial, it's allowing you and your dad to get a few more slings in your arrow as you go into this. So
Yeah.
they're not
That's
doing
one
themselves
thing
any
I'd
favors by
really
delaying.
like.
Okay, go ahead. Sorry.
No, there's a bunch of stuff, like, through the years, the longer they go, the more stuff kind of pops out that's like, oh, wait a minute, what about that? And then I kind of pursue it, and then, oh, wait about, so that does keep happening.
Right.
But at this point, the problem that we're having is that I have every intention of taking this to the Supreme Court. And if I have to go to the federal level, I will too.
Okay.
Because these are not just issues with like what happened specifically to me. I have issues now going through this whole process that are like the underlying basis for like for all the corruption that they've done. How have you been able to do this? How has this been allowed? Who's responsible for this? So now going forward, they're very, very, very aware. I don't really like mince words. I'm not very ambiguous.
Right. No.
When I write my motions and everything. And I think I told you guys this before, that it's the weirdest part of all of it is that all of it's in writing. This is a legal matter. We do not correspond. It's all email, motions, transcripts, like everything is written. So at this point going forward, once we go through the trial, which is a complete sham of it, it's not even a real, there's no issues and controversy at all. They're not defending themselves.
Oh.
They just don't want me to get to appeal. And then once I get to appeal, if they reject my appeal, then I can go to the Supreme Court. And if they reject it, then I can go to the federal Supreme Court. So they are just basically, we're just stuck in this limbo. I'm not even calendared anymore. I'm on standby. We're just in this limbo, just not moving forward because they've dug themselves into such a deep hole that they can't go back and they can't go forward.
Well, maybe talk.
So I just want to get.
I'm sorry. I was just hoping to get a little clarification about the corruption that you encountered and how that played in, and maybe elaborate a little bit on how that's affecting you right now, or how they've worn themselves into a hole.
Yeah. So you're supposed to, when you go into court, it's supposed to just be a venue for, I think this happened, and then the other person says, I think this happened, and you hash it out. That's what it's for. And you're supposed to have a judge who's just a neutral arbiter. Like, here's the law, here's how you apply it, here's the law, here's how you apply it. You both being fair, you're both having your opportunity to be heard. They're supposed to just be completely unbiased. So in my case, I have unfortunately not had that experience where I think, I don't know how or why or what, but basically the judge in my case has aided the defense in suppressing my claims and has protected them for all of their kind of misdeeds. So primarily what this whole thing is about is that I did an independent medical examination where, because this is a medical case, I allowed the defendants to hire their own doctors to evaluate me. So they did an examination on me. My dad, being in the industry, was like, well, you're not doing that unless it's professionally videotaped. So we videotaped the examination. And it wasn't like a secret recording where he's like in the back with his phone up or something. Like, it was a humongous camera. They scheduled it. It was all professionally done. We were at an office. They knew it was happening. And so they did this examination where they're supposed to be like doing the exam and then coming to a conclusion. And in the examination from the video, it's very obvious that they had a conclusion that they wanted to find and then catered the examination around that.
Right.
So not looking for things, like not asking questions that they don't want the answer to, ignoring certain things, doing irrelevant tests just to kind of make it look like they're doing all these fancy tests, but like taking the circumference of my arm. Like, these are spinal issues. Like, quit wasting your time with that kind of stuff. Doing the examination poorly. So basically, they had to then create a report on their findings in the examination, and their report did not line up to the video. Like, wow. Completely, without going into like how each test was wrong. Because again, I've got like a doctor in my pocket. Like, my dad sat there for probably, 12 hours and went through the video, and we stopped it every couple of seconds for him to be like, that's wrong, they did that wrong, that's not how you do that test. But even like, just for like layman's terms, there would be things where they in the report would say, well, we think she's faking because she had an inappropriate pain response, where they're basically saying that it was like a trap. Like, we asked if this hurt, it wasn't supposed to hurt, but she said, oh, ow, that hurt, so now she's faking. And then you watch the video and they'll do the test and I'm like, no, that doesn't hurt. So these kind of discrepancies. So just imagine for a second that I did that. I'm the plaintiff. I'm bringing this, case forward. Imagine if I hired a panel of 3 doctors to lie for me. What would you call that? Insurance fraud.
Right.
Wow.
But for whatever reason, it's okay for the defense to do it. And so I brought forward a motion. It was my first motion I'd ever written. And I, brought it into court where I was trying to have their testimony excluded on the basis that it was unreliable. I didn't even argue that their opinions were wrong. You're a medical professional. I'm not qualified. You can come to whatever medical opinion you want to, but the foundation of you getting there has to be reliable. You can't be making up test results that aren't true. You can't, there was twice in the video where I'm like dizzy and fainting, and he's like, the doctor's like looking at the table, kind of like looking around, and then it's like, I don't know why she's claiming this condition.
Wow.
Like crazy, just very blatant and very obvious. And I'm not trying to like toot my own horn or something. I'm just saying it's so bad that if I got them on the stand, it would probably take me 15 minutes to just completely, like, I don't know, maybe 6 questions before it was just obvious that, like, you're lying. They'd either plead the fifth because they don't want to incriminate themselves, or they would just switch their story. So that was pretty obvious. And I brought forward a motion to exclude their testimony on the basis that this was completely unreliable. This was fabricated. This is fraud. You can't allow, as the judge, you can't allow fraud into court. And my motion was denied. She said, no, that's really for the jury to determine. So then on the other side of that, they had filed a motion that, so my dad at this time, I'm sure you guys have talked to him about his pillow.
Yes.
That he made for me, by the way.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I totally want one. I really
An
want.
adjustable orthopedic pillow for his kids who needed it.
Yeah.
And at the time, he was focusing on that. Like, he had let his California chiropractic license lapse, and he was doing, my grandma died. We came up here and he was just kind of doing his own thing, and he didn't get his Washington license. He just was going to do the pillow thing for a little while. And so they were saying that because my dad wasn't currently licensed, all of his past opinions he couldn't like talk about.
Oh my God.
Which is crazy because doctors retire all the time and they can still come in and talk about what they did. And he's still an expert. There's no requirement anywhere that you will be able to find, except in a medical malpractice case where an expert witness has to be licensed. There's a very specific rule for it that they have if their knowledge, skill, experience, and training qualify them, they're an expert witness. You could be a plumber for 25 years and never be licensed, but your experience is like, well, I know what I'm doing. So basically they excluded they basically said he can't testify, he's not qualified because he's not licensed. So then fast forward many, many years later, my dad finally gets his license back. He gets it both in California and Washington.
Covers his base.
We were scheduled, covered it all. I'm ready to go. So we were scheduled for a trial on a Tuesday. We're always scheduled on a Tuesday. And the Friday before the trial started, my dad emailed the defense attorney, Gary Western, Gare Bear, that's what we call him, and told him, hey, Gare, I got my license back. I'm qualified to testify. I'll see you on Tuesday. That Monday, our trial was moved because the judge went on vacation.
Wow.
And we got word that we're not going to trial. A few weeks later, at that point, and I'll let my dad really go into this because he really, he did it. It turns out that he actually knows the defendants. That his, it's a small community. He's a professional in the community, everything.
The judge?
The owner, no, the defendants. So the owner of the company married a guy. That guy has a brother, and that brother and my dad were friends in high school.
Oh.
So, yeah. The two brothers, actually, like, they all kind of know each other. It's kind of weird. So my dad at this point is like, they're just like, and I can go into this, later, but for a long time, I really thought this attorney is trying to screw over these defendants. I feel a moral obligation to, like, tell them what's going on, because they're ultimately going to be responsible for this bad practice. And so I had tried to talk to them. I had been barred from talking to them. I have a court order that I'm not allowed to talk to the defendants at all, even though I totally can. But that's a whole other thing. And so my dad gets the trial moved after he alerts them that he's coming in to trial, and has just had it. So he sends a LinkedIn little message to this guy that he went to high school with and says, "Hey, I think this is your brother and your sister-in-law. There's some weird stuff going on. I think you guys should be aware of this. Like, this, like, enough is enough." So this is like
How long ago was
3 weeks after.
Okay, how long ago
This was in 2019.
Got it. Okay.
This was July of 2019.
Okay.
And so he sends a LinkedIn message and is like, "Okay, like, enough is enough. We need to get to the bottom of this. I think you guys are being, like, screwed over, basically." A couple weeks after that, I get a sanctions motion where the court sanctioned me for my dad, for me violating the court order by talking to the defendants. The brother of the wife of the on a LinkedIn message. So basically, I get a sanction that removed my dad completely as a witness.
Unreal.
Completely. He can't testify as my dad, and he can't testify as my doctor because of this.
And is
So
that-
because of that,
That
I'm sorry?
that order stands currently?
yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow. Like
So I'm not allowed to call him in, my primary witness for the medical side of it. Like, who cares about my dad? Like, he's my doctor. And then if a little bit after that, if you go back to where I tried to have the defendant's expert testimony, I tried to have that removed because it's unreliable. And I've got this on transcript too, that the judge said, well, really, that goes to weight and credibility, and that's for the jury to determine whether to believe them or not. I can't say that they're, reliable or not. That's for the jury. So I said, okay, and waited. So I tried to do, after my dad was excluded, the defense attorney basically said, well, since he's excluded and there's nobody to go against the medical testimony on our side, we're just not even calling our experts to trial anymore. So I tried to I filed a motion for a subpoena, because I don't know if you know this, but attorneys can just write their own subpoena and they can subpoena you. But I have to go and ask the court for a subpoena. And basically to call the defense experts in, and like you said that we were going to do this at trial, and like you can't just not do it at trial. And she denied my subpoena, so I can't kick them out and I can't bring them in. So basically the defendants are not presenting any witnesses, and they are not presenting any exhibits. So basically they're not defending themselves. I'm going to go into court, do an opening statement. They're going to do an opening statement. I'm going to testify. I'm going to close, and then they're going to close.
Wow.
So all of this is, like I told you, about my dad.
Wow.
They do not want him to come in, because not only does calling him in give me my evidence and allow him to testify and everything, but it also forces them to call in somebody of equal caliber. So if I call in a chiropractor, the only person who can say that he's wrong in his opinions is another chiropractor. It has to be the same status, basically.
So
another witness isn't credentialed.
So whose decision was it that you can't bring your father? And who was also
the judge?
The judge.
So then the judge must be powwowed with the people that own the business.
That's my working theory at this point.
Settled your case. Yeah.
But is that even is there a workaround here? What would be the best way to work around this situation? I mean,
appellate court. I have to go to the appeals court.
Okay.
And my fear with the appeals court is, like I said, I'm not very ambiguous. When I write my motions, I am very clear about where I stand, what I think, I've had multiple sanctions threatened to me that like, oh, we're going to sanction you if you don't stop calling Gary a liar, because they're more offended by me calling him a liar than him lying. And yeah, basically because I've put everything into writing like so thoroughly that, you know, my motions are 20, 30, 40 pages of me just like arguing. And because I think this is my thought for appellate court is that because I put everything so clearly and definitively into like, it's not that this judge is corrupt, it's that she's allowed to be corrupt. So I'm not just challenging her decision, I'm challenging the underlying ability to make that decision.
Wow.
And so my fear is that the appellate court is just going to be like, nope, not touching this, review denied, like not going to go into this. And that's, I feel is probably going to be the outcome for the both Supreme Courts as well, is that we are not going to touch any of this.
So you get in an accident when you're 6 years old, and you'll probably be a licensed attorney somewhere in the appeals process, is what it sounds like.
Probably, yeah. Appellate docket's about 2 years.
Well, hey, it'll be great for. I mean, this will definitely, you'll probably be able to utilize this.
Yeah, I am. I am like, I'm always like beefing with my professors. Just in my first semester, I'm like, oh, I don't think that that's right, or I don't think that's quite how that's supposed to be, or you know, just kind of like, you know, that's kind of not right.
I'm looking at all these pitfalls, you know, from the beginning to end. And, you know, had you not been who you are, and had your dad not been who he is, and had things not played out the way they did, you know, this would have been over a long time ago to your detriment. So
yeah,
it's extraordinary that, you know, you've got the stuff to fight this, and you're in a unique position with your father to fight this. And this is what happens when you're equipped. They're not used to this. Usually, I would imagine the default position would be, you know, an extraordinarily low settlement that doesn't take into account any of the actual damages and the impact it's had on your life. Wow.
So it's not just that. It's not just like the merit of the case. It's like a bunch of these sort of like weird happenings that they're not really, I think, accustomed to. And the biggest issue that I have found throughout this whole thing comes down to status. And the constitutional value of that is that when I go into court, I'm not an attorney. When you're an attorney, you are an officer of the court, and you're licensed to practice law. So what happens when you have a license is that you are consenting, you're willfully consenting to have your rights exchanged for privileges. So that's what most people kind of don't understand about that is the only way to ever give up your rights is through consent. You either infringe on somebody else's, which is still your active consent of doing so, or you agree to be limited. And that's usually through contracting, through licensing, anything like that. So basically, when you're an attorney and you're licensed as an attorney and you're going into court, you don't have freedom of speech. You can't say anything you want to a judge, and that's protected under your free speech. You're bound when you're an attorney. You are absolutely bound through your license to all decisions that judge makes. You're agreeing that whatever they say as basically your boss is how it goes. So for me in this case, they keep trying to like make me an attorney, and I keep saying I'm not an attorney. I'm not a lawyer. I'm a person. And I kind of told you that there's like two different terms. There's pro se and then there's pro per. Pro se is basically you're self-represented. Pro per is you're just presented. And that's, I guess, maybe kind of another avenue that we shouldn't go all the way into. But basically, when I'm in front of the judge, she keeps telling me that, well, you can't say these things. And I say, well, actually, I have constitutional rights. I can say whatever I want, especially in the face of tyranny. This is the place for it.
Yeah.
When I feel that I'm your boss, you work for me. You're here for me to exercise my rights to recovery. You're not here for them to lawyer all over the place and you to like be a judge. You're here for me. And to say that I'm limited in some capacity of what I can say and how I can say it is a violation of my free speech. To try and regulate me, to try and claim this authority over me as though I'm an attorney. They just keep trying to make, like, the reason that I can't talk to the defendants is because of a bar association rule applied to me that a lawyer, it's RPC 4.2. A lawyer can't talk to an unrepresented, a lawyer can't talk to a represented defendant or plaintiff, so the opposing party. So they're trying to say that because the defendants have a representative, I can only speak to the representative. I can't speak to the defendants, as though I'm an attorney, and I'm not. So we keep running into these issues of status about I'm not somebody that is just under your, I'm number one here under your jurisdiction voluntarily. I filed a claim in court. I granted you conditional authority over me for this matter. That does not mean that when I step into court that you're in charge of me, you're in charge of the subject matter, but I don't fall within your regulation as a court. And so this is the issue. This is the battle that I've been having with this judge of who exactly do you think you are? And did you forget who I am? You have conditional authority that has been granted to you by the people of the country. It's a contract. The Constitution is a contract. Your oath of office is a contract. So in exchange for you to exercise these duties, we are going to grant you some privileges. We're going to give you some of our authority to exercise your job functions. But when I step into court, I am a full force. I have all of my rights. You do not just claim authority over me. And that's the biggest issue that we've come up against, is that I'm not going to be subjugated to you just because you want me to. You're going to have to give me a better reason.
Right.
Well, you're not practicing law, but you're getting a lot of practice, or practicing law while not practicing law.
Yeah.
It feels like Arrested Development, the Bob blog. This is great.
Yeah.
We're coming up on an hour. Is there a nice way to tie this into a bow until next time, and maybe outline the direction we're going to take it on part 2?
As an end note or as a final thing, if you're ever involved in a controversy of this kind of nature, or you ever need to step into court, do your research. Don't allow an attorney to just come in and barrel over you and, well, I'm the expert and I know better, because they don't know better when it comes to the actual experience that somebody has. They might be able to quote some precedent from 1962 that doesn't really matter anyway, but they don't know better than you. The court doesn't know better than you. The government doesn't know better than you. Whatever you've got inside of you, it's what our whole system of government is based off of, is that we have this inherent truth within us, that we do know better. And if you have the opportunity, stand on it, because it really does make a difference in the end. It's what we need as a country to be doing right now, is stop handing the reins over. Do it yourself, do the work. Like, it has to be done. We're a self-governed society, and people need to start stepping up and actually following through on it and do it. Or there won't ever be any accountability.
Well said.
So.
Yeah. Well, we definitely look forward to the next part, and we'll let that unfold organically. And really appreciate you being on the show. This is our first time tackling.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Yeah. So, well, and we think the world of your dad as well. So it's cool to be a part of this process, and maybe this, who knows if this is part of a documentary or what this will be someday. So we're just,
I don't know. I mean, I genuinely just want people to be aware of the things that are going on. That's it. And you don't know it until you have to know it. It's kind of one of those things. So yeah, any way that I can help get the word out, whatever.
awesome. Anything else?
Well, hopefully we can help you do that.
Yeah.
I think that today, and I'm really looking forward to next time. Maybe we can bring your dad in. I think that's gonna add a whole nother
Element, yeah.
element. Sure.
Oh boy.
So much for joining us today.
Another yeah, no problem. Thank you guys for having me.
All right. Talk to you soon. Another question is, in a nutshell, if you were to give an elevator pitch, if you will, how does, I guess it's the combination of the Trinity pack, how does that rid the body of the jab? What's the best way to explain that to the layperson, if you will?
Control Alt Delete. We're a computer, right? So if your computer has a bug, what do? You shut it down, you let it reset, and then it'll reboot. It goes on. And you can't reset your computer, right? Control Alt Delete. Oh, that too is a Trinity.
Yeah.
Makes you think, right? But so delete is what clean slate is doing for grabbing onto and removing. Control is what restore is doing, take care of the gut. And then the alt button is basically what 0N's doing to, change neurotransmission. But if you want to reset your computer, you can't just hold down the control button and think it's going to work. You have to hit all three of them. So, and when you do that, then, then you get the body to reset.